On today's episode of In the Know, we'll be exploring updates to Intuit Enterprise Suite. Hey Pro Advisors, it's Jacqueline, and you're watching In the Know, where you get exclusive access to demos of Intuit product enhancements by the leaders who built them. Let's jump right in with Daniel, who leads Intuit Enterprise Suite. Welcome, Daniel. It's so great to have you back.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Real excited to be here. Now let's dive in. All right, so the first thing we want to jump into is a feature that I'm personally really excited about, and it's the allocations of expenses and bills. So if I go ahead and create a new expense, so now I'm going to select a vendor for my expense. Maybe it's going to be Alfarsi. And in this case, let's say I want to allocate maybe it's consultancy expense. Let's say it is for $1,000. I'm going to close this on the right here. And I'm going to leave my dimensions blank for now. I'm going to click allocate at the bottom here. And then you see this one line item here. I could also allocate multiple line items, but in this case, I'm just going to show the consultancy expense. I click allocate. I have a drop down that shows my two entities. So in this case, I have Keystone Construction and Keystone Terra. Those are the two entities in my organization. And let's say I want to allocate across both of them. And then I want to allocate it equally across both of these entities. So I check that. I click save. And so it automatically does the allocation for me. However, if I wanted to change that up, I can, either by changing the percentages or by the dollar amounts. But in this case, I'm going to leave it as is. I'm going to select the expense category for Keystone Terra, which is kind of the target company in this case. And it will be consultancy as well. And once I'm happy with my allocations, I click Save Allocation. And done. That expense has been allocated to both these entities. So this $1,000 is now $500 per entity. Now I can always go back and do that allocation again. I can also go and view the actual allocation journal, which is the entry that happens in the back end to actually do this allocation. So I click View Allocation Journal. And this takes me to the intercompany journal entry that actually posts this entry to these two companies. And so you can see that it captured that account that I selected here for both the source, or in this case, parent company, Keystone Construction, as well as the target, or in this case, the subsidiary or child entity, which is Keystone Terra. So you see the consultancy expense. But you also see the due to and due froms have also been automatically captured. And you may be asking, how did it know? How did it know that these are the right accounts to post to? And I would say that's a great question. Let me show you. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to go to my multi-entity hub and the overview page. And once I land on the overview page, you may see some new KPI widgets, and we'll get to those in a second. But first, you'll notice in my shortcuts here, I have an option called Intercompany Account Mapping. And if I open that up, this is essentially a structured way to map the due tos and due froms for those intercompany expense and bill allocations. And so the way it works is you have your source company, which can be either entity, or if you have multiple entities, it can be really any of the entities that actually gets charged that expense or bill. So that's considered the source company. And so in this case, let's say Keystone Construction is my source company. And then I can see my target company in this case is Keystone Terra. But if I've had other entities within this group, I'd be able to add them and have that full list. Then I see the next column is source company's intercompany receivable. So again, in this case, Keystone Construction is my source company, and I've selected my due from Keystone Terra as my intercompany receivable. And then I have a target company's intercompany payable. And so this is for Keystone Terra in this case, which is the target company. And I have my due from selected here as well. So it knows exactly which account to post it to. Okay, so we covered the allocation from the expense form. We covered the way to set up the due tos and due froms to automatically get mapped when you post that allocation through the transaction interface. And we looked at the intercompany journal entry on the back end that actually gets generated when we do an allocation. Now we landed on our overview dashboard here under the multi-entity tab. And you'll notice a number of new KPIs showing up. And so these are our new KPI widgets, and they cover the profit and loss, the income, the expense, the accounts receivable, and accounts payable at the aggregate level. So it pulls in the data across all the entities within this group. And so as we know, in this case, we've got two entities here. And so it pulls in the data from both of these entities. And you can go ahead and change the time periods. So let's say I want to switch this to this year. Same with the income. I can change this to this year. I can change this to this year. And so now you can see all the numbers align, and I get a good quick view of the performance of my entities, kind of at an overview level. I also have my AR and AP. Now this is defaulted as of today. So it shows me my overall AP balance and my overall AR balances. Now I can actually go ahead and filter this to only show an individual company or multiple companies, depending on what I'm looking to view here. So if I have maybe 15 entities, I can select 2, 3, 4, as many entities as I want and aggregate only those entities, easily filtering it using this dropdown, and all the different widgets get updated accordingly. Now, this is what we just launched in March, but we are actually going to be launching a fast follow where we'll actually show the aging metrics here for the AR and AP. So you'll actually see the typical aging view that you currently have available on the single entity dashboard. And then following that, we'll also launch the supporting aggregated AR, AP aging reports. So, or maybe another way to put it is consolidated AR and AP aging reports that will be linked directly from these widgets. So these are all going to be fast follow launches coming up in the future. Okay, last thing I want to call out is we looked at the expense allocation. You can also do a bill allocation. So I'm not going to do it, but I'm going to show you. So once the bill is loaded, you can see that you've got the allocation here. So once you've selected a vendor and you've selected an expense, you can then allocate it, you select a category, you can allocate it in a similar fashion as you do for an expense. And then if you actually go to your expense list, you will see which of your expenses have been allocated. So for example, these two, I've got this one over here that I can open up and see what that allocation looks like, which I'm not going to do right now. Now, the last thing I'll mention about this is that although this multi-entity dashboard and the selection from the left navigation is only available on the parent entity within the group, these allocations that I just showed you for both expenses and bills are available on all of the entities. So if I was to switch to Keystone Terra and I have an expense that I want to process from that side, I will see the allocation option showing up on the expense form as well as on the bill form. So it can be allocated from any of the entities, not just the parent entity. All right, now we're going to switch gears and we're actually going to go to Keystone Terra. All right, so now I landed in Keystone Terra, and I'm now going to show you some of the innovations that have come to market on our financial planning and analysis modules. So I'm going to click on forecasting. And so the latest innovation of forecasting is if we actually want to create a custom forecast now, we can actually subdivide it by dimensions. In the past, we were only able to do it by class. And so now we've expanded that to also include custom forecasts by dimensions. So customer, service, group type, earthwork, concrete, these are all custom user-defined dimensions that I have for this entity. And so I can easily create budgets for, maybe I'll do it at the header level within my service group type. There it is. Let's say I want to use the average of the actuals for the last 3 months. Maybe I want to increase this by 4%, increase COGS by maybe 3.5%, increase expenses by 2%, and increase other income by 1%, and maybe I'll decrease my other expenses. And then we'll click go. And so now this will generate a forecast for these 3-dimension header levels and forecast it out for the next few years. And then when I'm happy with that, I'm actually going to edit the name. I'm going to call this forecast by dimension. And we're going to call this service type. And I'm going to save. Now, if I wanted to, I can actually convert this into a budget as well. But in this case, I'm just going to leave it as is. And so I've got my forecast. And so this is something we just launched. And so now you will be able to forecast by specific dimensions and then convert them into budgets by dimensions as well to run your budgets versus actuals. But also, I go to reports and I type in forecast. I'll notice I have two new forecast reports. The first one is forecast overview. So if I click this, and so in this case, I'm looking at April 1st until the end of the year, December. And this is my forecast overview report. So it just gives me the line item forecast. I can go ahead and, in this case, I'm displaying it by months, but I could do it by quarters or even just for the full year. Maybe I'll leave it at quarter level. Then I can go in and change some of the details here. So in this case, I'm using my latest one. So forecast by dimension. What I also like to do is actually make this only non-zero rows. So I only see the rows with values in them. And then I'm happy with that. And then I can also filter by, let's call it type, just like account type or actual account. But I'm not going to do any of my filters right now because I want to see everything. And this gives me that overview report so I can see kind of the overall forecast accordingly. And then if we go back to reports, we are exit without saving. And we type forecast again. We can actually also run a forecast versus actuals. And this is something that's been there's been a lot of demand for. So we're excited to actually bring this to the market now. And you can run a report that shows you your forecast versus your actuals. And so you can control how the comparatives look like. Do you want the variance? Do you want the variance percentage? And your display by. So in this case, it's months. But let's say I want to look at it by quarters. This, again, is April to December. So I can see exactly how my forecast is performed by quarter. Now, obviously, in the future, we don't have actuals yet, and these actuals just flowing in, although it looks like I'm using different accounts now, which I'll likely need to adjust my forecast so everything aligns properly. But for the purposes of this example, you kind of see how it all flows through. And then similarly, I can go into my general options and only include non-zeros, and makes the data a lot more consumable. And that's my new forecast actual reports. I'm going to go back here. Okay. Next thing we're going to talk about some of the industry-specific innovations that we launched. And specifically, it's going to be on the project side. So when I go to projects, I'm going to look at my project list. There's my pool. And now once I open this, I notice I now have a couple new options called add budgets. I can add a budget through the estimates versus actuals widget here. I can add a project budget through the drop down here. There's a few other places, but I'm going to go ahead and do it here. Now, this is a feature that we've been getting a lot of requests for. And again, that is the ability to create a project-based budget, which is different from a company budget in a few different ways. Number one, it allows you to do a budget for a specific time period that doesn't necessarily align with your fiscal period, right? So if you're January to December, you don't have to have a project budget that's January to December, because that's not how projects actually run, right? It could be from any time period. And so in this case, it's from April 9th until 29th. And so that is the range for this specific project budget. And secondly, it actually ties to a specific project, not for the company overall, right? And so every individual project can now have a custom budget for a custom time period. And within that budget, we are also able to pull in additional items like classes, dimensions, custom fields if we have them. All that can be pulled into our budget. And then as you enter the data, you can add additional line items and so on. But that's not the coolest thing here. The coolest thing here is we now have a way to import budgets from Excel, and it leverages our actual AI capabilities to pull in unstructured data, essentially. So if you have a budget, it doesn't have to be using our template. You can use whatever template that you're comfortable with or you're already using. And the AI tool will actually identify individual line items, map them to the cost codes you already have in your products and services, and make some suggestions if it can't align something at 100% certainty. So let's see what that looks like. So I actually have a budget already prepared. So I'm going to import a budget from Excel. And then it asks me which tab. So in this case, my budget has multiple tabs. I want to use my final cost tab. Okay, so here's kind of the summary of what just happened. So we autofilled 9 details from the budget examples to my actual project. Now we found 2 items without a 100% match. And they then suggest we do a quick review to make sure that the mapping that the AI decided on is correct. And if not, then we can make some changes. Everything else matched 1-to-1, meaning the name that I had in my Excel matches exactly what I had in my products and services listing. But these 2 were not exact. So I open this up by clicking this little icon here. It tells me, okay, we found this item and there's 2 potential places that it may make sense to map it to. So maintenance of concrete or cement bag. So in this case, I'm happy with the maintenance of concrete. So I'm going to add it. And then in this case, we found we found a similar item called maintenance of metals. And that's kind of what it's mapped it to, but it could very well be actually maintenance of finishes, which is actually what it is. So I'm going to switch that and I'm going to add. And if there was something else that's not currently available in our existing listing, I could go ahead and create a new product and service for this line item. But in this case, I'm happy with changing to products, to finishes rather. And when I'm happy with that, I can click save. I can also kind of close this thing. But before I do that, show a few more areas of customization here. So you can rearrange and organize your columns. You could add, remove available fields, and you can control how many rows or how many the type of structure of the table here, right? Do you want it to be roomy, compact? So if I want to change to roomy, it gets bigger. If I want it to be cozy, it's a little smaller. If I want it to be compact, it's as tight as possible. And I could also throw in some alternate row colors, make it look nice. When I'm happy with this, I click save. And my budget gets saved to this project. I can then close it. And now I land back on my project page for dance pools. And so there I see my budget added to the estimates versus actuals. I can then actually create a brand new estimate to this customer. And then when I go ahead and select a product and service from my budget, the cost gets auto-populated. And so all I have to do is enter the quantity that I want to set an estimate for at this point. So maybe 4. And then I enter what my markup is. In this case, let's say 15%. And then everything is populated automatically. So customer rate is 115, which is 15% on top of my cost of 100. And at a quantity of 4, that adds up to $460. And then I can review and send it to the customer, which I'm not going to do right now. But I am going to save. And then when I save it, so if I go to transactions, there's my estimate because it has to be accepted first. So if I actually open this back up and I change this to accepted. And now I close this. There it is. And so I have this estimate that's been sent out or accepted, and here's my overall budget. And so everything gets populated automatically. And then when you run your estimate versus actual reports, all that data gets flown through. So if I actually go to my project reports and I look at my estimates versus actuals for this project, I see my budget here, my estimated cost based on that budget, my estimated income based on the estimate I sent out. And then as my actual income or my actual costs flow through, this all gets populated, showing the difference across the costs the revenues, and the overall profitability. And that's a wrap for the March releases of the Intuit Enterprise Suite. Until next time, remember, Intuit loves accountants.
Really great stuff. Thank you so much, Daniel. And thank you. If you find this update interesting or helpful, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. That's all we have for now. So for more product updates and demos, check out our In the Know Hub and be sure to register for our monthly webinar. We'll catch you next time.